was watching a video by Cynthia just now, and I'm gonna have kind of a different perspective, I think, than both sides, which is going to find people might think a little odd of me, but I'm a maverick, okay? And so I have different perspectives on different topics, okay? So, there's this video that she was talking about black men who were in interracial relationships, right? As she always does. There was this one biracial couple, interracial couple, black man, white woman, and they took these photos where they are basically, I guess, slavery themed photos. And he has chains on him, and she's freeing him. I saw that it was for an engagement photo, like it's for engagement photos. So I think it's more symbolic than anything, honestly. Um, that's what I perceived it to be. I mean, like, she did say that, and I've seen other people say that, basically, it was said that he was no longer a slave but a part of the family. But in regard to what are they saying he's a slave of or to? You know what I mean? It might not have a racial connotation with it. At least I think, like, it's better to give the benefit of the doubt. I mean, if he's happy with her, I can't make that judgment for him if she's really a bad person simply because they had slave themed, photos, slavery themed photos or whatever, for their engagement photos. To me, I don't know, it's just like, I didn't have any issue with that, really, honestly. It was just like, well, that's not too concerning to me. What was more concerning is something that she didn't even bring up. And I noticed a lot of people did not bring up with this topic. You know, I've talked about this before, honestly, and personally, to me, I'm like, a lot of black men, you know, actually, she did talk a little bit about it. She pointed out that black men have always wanted to be in a submissive position, and that they always wanted to serve under the white man or under things of that nature, um, and that they're not productive, the whole narrative. And, you know, in part, she tried to use this as a way to blame black men for slavery, which I thought was a dumb move, honestly, because it's like, this is the same mentality that a lot of um, black people have of slavery. They're always blaming black people for slavery. They're always blaming other, like the black people of old, for slavery, you know. They never focus on what kind of individual does that to someone, you know. They never focus on how psychopathic someone has to be to actually commit the atrocities that were committed during slavery. I mean, we all know, like, think of it. People have so much sympathy for people nowadays who get beaten, raped, verbally abused for 18 years of their life, maybe, by bad parents. But, like, instead of blaming the actual perpetrators of the crimes with slavery, we don't actually realize, all that happened on a grand scale to the black men and the black women. And I mean, because of that, on top of never being free and always being abused in the ways I just described until the day you die. And doing that for generation to generation to generation. And you expect a people to actually be able to move forward when you've had generation after generation after generation of systemic extreme abuses to, you know, the point where, they could never get out of it because that was a part of the whole law. That that's what they were supposed to sustain simply because they were black people. And where I don't understand, does the blame go for black men or black women for crimes that they never committed? Like, obviously, it would be the people who committed the crimes against them, white men of those times, and, white women of those times. No, people always say just white men. I mean, there were several situations where white female slave owners, tortured their slaves too. So I never understood why people just talk about the male or the female. Like, it's obviously both, but like, to me, I just think like the fact that you blame them shows your mindset. It shows your mindset and how you basically are of the same mindset I was talking about black men who, for example, use the term bedwench, for example. Which bedwench, is a term that has to do with actually rape victims during slavery. And basically trying to blame the victim when the white male rapist was the only one at fault in those situations, was the only monster in those situations. Same thing here. Um, a lot of the time, it's like, I think she has the same mindset as those people, and she basically blames black people for slavery when in reality, black people should never have been slaves. So blaming them for slavery kind of implies, you have some kind of self hate issue that you think like that, black women, like black men, should have been able to get themselves out of slavery when they weren't even raised with their own fathers. They were purposely separated from their families. These people basically took black men as black boys and tortured them until they died. For real. From birth to death. And you mean to tell me that these people should have been able to get past the torture and somehow, get past their bondage? Of course, I mean, if you destroy someone from the time they're born until they die, they're not going to be able to productively do that, I don't think, because, you didn't give them the tools to function as a functional adult, for one, because you spent time torturing them for 80 years or however long they lived. So, to me, I mean, like, blaming slavery on black men is just ignorant. Being completely honest. Um, Also, I don't think that we should blame white people at this day and age for slavery. When in reality, if you actually look at the situation, I mean, black Americans nowadays are related to their to the slaves and slave owners of the past. So, I mean, if we're talking about blaming someone who is a descendant of slave owners, well, we'd have to blame black people because they literally always do have slave owner ancestry. White people sometimes are the descendants of immigrants. So, I mean, technically, if anyone, I guess you would look to black people in that regard, but that would be dumb, obviously. me. So obviously, I don't think you should blame white people for slavery nowadays when that's their descendants. As I mean, that's their ancestors. We can't control what our ancestors did, who were slave owners, any more than they can. So I mean, like, trying to be angry at white people for that is stupid, but trying to get angry at black men of old for the torture that they went through is just self-hating. One thing though that I wanted to talk about was she did talk about being submissive, but she didn't talk about it in the way that I think is pertinent in this situation, okay? So to me, I think like I talked about, black men these days and how there's a thing, a subculture, I guess, of black men that are, slaves, sex slaves. Um, there are some people who are, sex slaves or female sex slaves, and they're male sex slaves. And then there are black male sex slaves. Um, and the embarrassing part of this is this that those black male sex slaves, in my opinion, it's just weird that they pay people to basically treat them like a black slave. You know, you don't see that with other people. You don't see that with black women or anything. And from my perspective, this is the thing. It's like, okay, you have an issue with these people making an engagement photo about a slave themed photo, basically, saying that she's freeing him from being a slave. Okay, so when people get into marriages and things like that, sometimes they feel like they're a slave and now they're free and they're marrying a person and they're free to love that person, you know. So it might not completely have to do with like anything extreme as what I just was describing a second ago. To me, I do think the whole black slave thing is problematic. But I mean, that's what they do. That's their personal life. That's their personal choice. But I mean, like, it is a bit embarrassing people pay to actually be called, you know, derogatory names and called the N word and, you know, worse things than that too. Not just the N word. There's like the S word, the C word, a lot of other words. But you know, it is embarrassing that, black people would pay to, you know, be called derogatory words or derogatory names pertaining to being black. But I don't think in this case this is related to that. I don't feel like that is too concerning that this couple felt like she was freeing him from being a slave and they are going on to their happy marriage. Like, I don't see anything wrong with that. Also, one other thing I wanted to talk about was how basically I liked one thing she pointed out that the guy was a supporter of black women and black men being into interracial dating, you know, interracial relationships. Sorry, I'm sleepy. Late. Um, and so to me, I mean, like, I appreciated that. I don't really have anything against the couple or anything like that. And I think her perspective on slavery in America is wrong. I think she was getting somewhere with the submissive part, but she didn't really pay attention to like the reality of, like basically the whole subculture of black slaves and things of that nature when it comes to sex slaves. And how people pay, for that kind of action. So, to me, like I said, this photo is nothing compared to that. I don't see anything wrong with it, honestly. As long as they're happy, love is love. And I mean, like, if they're truly happy with each other, I don't understand why anyone has to be angry. I know why she's angry. I mean, she's angry because she wishes she could ride his dick and, be in a relationship with the guy who did the slave themed photos and is mad that, that he's with a white woman and not with a woman like her. Um, but that doesn't really change, anything. It just shows your motive, basically, the motive of why she went in on him. And I mean, that's kind of obvious. That's all I really have to say on that. Like I said, this video is gonna come out two ways, basically, because I do agree that some black men like to be submissive. I've seen it myself with my own. I've seen it myself. I've never been sexually active with a black man. Not saying that. I'm just saying I've heard it, and I don't really care to share how I know, but I know. And, it's just what it is. But I mean, like, it's not, I don't think this photo has to do with that. So, yeah, that's all I have to say, on this, really. It's just that, I think even people who, are sex slaves, I wanted to talk about that too, I forgot. When it comes to interracial dating, interracial relationships, and things of that nature, and relationships in general, I don't think everybody is submissive like she was trying to portray. It's like the same thing with what people who hate black women who are spoilers too, basically. They love to claim that black women, you know, are submissive. Yeah, and they have this kind of like slave play that we supposedly do or whatever. And it's like, I think that is extrapolated to many women. Like, I was talking on like three different channels. One is Leather. I know she does a channel. Um, Another channel I've shouted out before. And another channel, I don't even know that channel's name. These are all channels. So Leather, I don't know her full name. It's Leather and something else. I don't quite know her name. And then there's I think it was Playing with Fire, and then someone else. Anyway, they all had this assumption that females were submissive, and one was a female, one was male, and I think one was LGBT. I think, and I think that's in part what I was trying to say here. I know I'm kind of going off, but off of topic, but I think a lot of the time people who, assume females are always like submissive or whatever, you know, in bed. And it's like, personally, I can say that that's not true, Not all women are, submissive. A lot of women aren't. A lot of women are more dominant in bed. And, I tend to think that might have to do with why people assume, like, in interracial relationships for women, that we tend to be more submissive and we're like some kind of like sex slave or whatever. Because, yeah, which is weird. But, um, I wanted to say, yeah, with black men, of course, there's black men who aren't, you know, submissive in bed, and they would not be like black slaves or anything like that, black sex slaves, or you know, they wouldn't do that kind of race play stuff. Um, and there's obviously women who are the same way. There are black women who obviously are not into that at all. So I'm like, with interracial dating, I'm not trying to put an idea that, black men are, all sex slaves or black women are all sex slaves. I'm trying to put that some are of black men and some of them pay to, get those services done. And, you know, I don't think that just because someone wants something that's different, than what a lot of other people want sexually, that we have to extrapolate that to a whole group of people. The only reason we do that with interracial dating is because people don't like interracial dating. So people like Cynthia G, who don't like black men who interracially date, um, she generally tries to, attack those men, basically, and try to use different examples to basically talk poorly about their relationships or their sex life or something of that nature to feel better. So it's the same thing with black women who are swirlers and divestors. It's the same response. Many of the time, black men may try to, tear them apart on their relationship or sex life, or, speak poorly about them, lie on them, and stuff like that. It's like, it's not true for most people who interracially date, whether you're a black man or a black woman. So, all in all, about the couple, I did like have no issue with the couple, and I did appreciate that they were um that there was a line saying that they supported interracial dating, for black men and black women. So I mean, like, I have nothing against them. I mean, I probably agree with them. Um, the kind of engagement photos that they choose to have is their business, honestly. And I mean, like, if they're okay with it, I don't understand why anyone has to care. If they were both white or they were both black, no one would care. Like, most likely people would just say, oh, it's symbolic, probably to, saving him from whatever he was a slave to, whatever was harming him, before they got together and they decided to get married. So that's all I have to say on that. Thank you for watching, and bye.